Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on K2 and UiPath. My name's Andrew Blinko. I'm a consultant with K2 ANZ and I'm joined today by Sean from rapidMATION, who are a K2 and UiPath partner. In this webinar we're going to look at full lifecycle business automation using DPA and RPA. So if you have any questions as we go, please post them in the questions window and we'll try to get to them at the end. So let's start off with an introduction to DPA and RPA. So what are DPA and RPA? So DPA is an acronym for Digital Process Automation, and RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. DPA is a strategic approach that concentrates on reshaping and digitizing an organization's existing business processes to achieve optimal efficiencies and productivity. DPA is also known as Business Process Management, or BPM. RPA automates repetitive rules-based tasks typically performed by humans on the computer, utilizing the user interface to manipulate data and applications just as a human would. So both DPA and RPA technologies deal with automation, and both are increasingly being used in digital transformation projects. They are, however, distinctly different technologies and cannot be used as a substitute for one another. Instead, DPA and RPA are complementary and when deployed together provide a powerful platform to enable digital transformation across an organization. So what are the key differences between RPA and DPA? So robotic process automation is concerned primarily with creating robots or bots that are designed to complete routine, monotonous and repetitive tasks that an employee would normally do. Whereas DPA takes a more holistic approach to process automation. It includes business analytics, workflows with human tasks, and a focus on optimizing the business process to increase value and efficiency. So the tasks that RPA focuses on are repetitive, rules-based ones that do not require complex decisions, whereas DPA focuses on end-to-end process automation with an aim to eliminate bottlenecks, connect data from different systems and increase your productivity. Deployment of an RPA solution is typically non-disruptive as it works with existing applications and processes, whereas DPA is typically a longer-term effort that could require dedicated technical resources depending on complexity and integrations required. So your RPA solutions can provide quick and immediate gains, whereas the business impact of DPA solutions are usually significant and transformational with gains in overall productivity, cost reduction, and increased compliance. So for those of you on the call who have not seen or heard about K2 before, here's just a quick introduction. So K2 is a low-code automation platform, and there are 4 tenets of the K2 platform. There's a powerful low-code workflow engine. We have feature-rich web-based forms with the ability to integrate with any data source, and analytics and reporting to give you deeper insight into your processes. In addition, you can access your K2 apps via your mobile device. You can use the security and governance features to enable control and compliance. You can choose different deployment options, on-premise or cloud, and you can quickly install and configure a number of pre-built applications. So K2 can automate and digitize vertical and horizontal processes which span departments. So these processes can be internal or external or both to the organization. So the starting point of process automation is your data. Business data is now often referred to as the new currency. And K2's objects are a patented piece of technology that allow you to use any existing data in the organization. So some examples could be SQL Server, Office 365, SAP, Salesforce, REST-based services, and a lot of others. So data can come directly from these systems, or a smart object could actually combine data from multiple systems. So once the data is in a smart object, you can use this data on a user interface called a K2 Smart Form. And these are available on mobile, tablet, and desktop. And these forms are responsive across these devices, which means you only need to build them once. You can route work around using workflow capabilities. And you can get deep insights into your automated processes and see who has what task, how long they've had it for, what they do with it, and easily identify bottlenecks to evolve your process. So K2 allows you to combine integration, forms, workflow, and insight to solve a range of business problems. Some examples of this could be employee onboarding or offboarding, leave requests, purchase order approval, invoicing, capital expenditure, and many, many more. Now, recently, K2 announced a global technology alliance with UiPath. UiPath is a robotic process automation platform. And here today to tell us more about UiPath and how K2 and UiPath can work together, we have one of our partners, rapidMATION. And so I'm going to hand over now to Sean.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen out quickly for you and just start up the slide deck on my side. All right, so a bit about rapidMATION. So rapidMATION is an outcome-focused consulting services business, and we help companies implement intelligent automation. Intelligent automation could span a number of different things. It could span digital process automation, robotic process automation. It could have a flavor of artificial intelligence, and even sometimes we use chatbots to solve different problems for our customers. rapidMATION is both a K2 and a UiPath partner, and we have a very experienced automation team that holds many K2 and UiPath certifications and diplomas. And today we're going to share a few examples of some of the work that we've done for some of our customers. But just to kick off, let's firstly talk a bit more about RPA. So Andrew gave us a great introduction there, but RPA is essentially computer-based software that allows us to automate repetitive rules-based tasks. These are typically performed by humans on their computer, and really what it does is it utilizes the user interface that a human would to manipulate data and applications just as we as humans would do. So some examples could be open emails and attachments, logging into different websites, moving files and folders. This could range from collecting data for different reports, and there's really some great scenarios that we can put together using RPA. If we look at things, RPA allows us to automate tedious and time-consuming work, and enables us as people to focus on more creative, challenging problems. So for processes, for some of the benefits that we get from this is obviously RPA allows us to do things more accurately, faster, and at scale, and also comply with compliance. But again, it takes away some of those mundane tasks that we as humans are often involved in that could be automated. RPA at the moment is actually getting a lot of traction in the market, and some of the things we're seeing, here's some stats from a Deloitte consulting report that was recently released. We see that 53% of people have already started their RPA journey. 72% of these organizations say that they will have adopted RPA by 2020, and 78% who have implemented say that they're even going to increase their investment over the next 3 years. So really some exciting things happening in the RPA space. UiPath, who is an RPA vendor, have actually claimed that they're the fastest growing enterprise software company in history. So there's really some great scenarios and take up in the market around RPA. Now, some of the scenarios that we can weave together using K2, which is a digital process automation platform, and UiPath, which is a robotic process automation platform, is really interesting. So firstly, if you already have K2 and you wanted to add UiPath to K2, what this gives you, it gives you the ability to let bots handle the repetitive and mundane tasks, or even scale up the human tasks that we need to do on a day-to-day basis. It allows us to automate integrations that are not easily accessible via an API. And what this allows us to do is obviously gain efficiency and accuracy. On the other hand, if you already have UiPath and you want to add K2 to a UiPath scenario, this lights up some very interesting scenarios, and it allows K2 to handle any of the robotic exceptions. So maybe if something goes wrong inside this standard process and we need to involve a human, we can hand that off to K2 to get a human involved and obviously put some input into the process and make a decision. And obviously what this allows us to do is to orchestrate manual approvals. It gives us business rules and integrations with systems. And the end result is visibility and exception handling across that process. Then if you actually combine both UiPath and K2 together, what you do is you get end-to-end process orchestration, right? And this allows humans, robots, and systems to work together in a seamless process. And what this allows you to do is to go to end-to-end digital transformation. If you look at what's happened recently is K2 and UiPath have set up a global technology alliance. And what this technology alliance allows us to do now is to offer solutions that involve both robots and humans to work together with the end goal of actually having a full end-to-end digital transformation process. So if we look at some of the scenarios that we can do now, from a workflow, we can actually have a UiPath robot start a K2 workflow. And on the other side of that, we can have a K2 workflow start a UiPath robot. From a forms perspective, obviously a UiPath robot could obviously read any data from a K2 smart form or input any data into a K2 smart form. And then from a K2 smart form, what we can actually do is we can actually start a UiPath robot. And then obviously there's some great line of business integration stories between the two through the patented piece of technology that K2 has called Smart Objects. Very recently, within the last week or so, UiPath have also actually created a client activity for K2. So this means from a UiPath process, we can actually go through and we can kick off a K2 workflow, which is really, really nice. And we've used both of these aforementioned technologies to actually weave together some of the demos and some of the processes that we've actually implemented with customers. So moving on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to 3 scenarios that we'll take you through that show K2 and UiPath together. It starts with probably more a simplistic one and then moves on to quite a complex one. And the first one we're going to look at is using K2 and UiPath together for expense claim management. This really fits into the personal productivity category. So this is personal productivity for an employee. If you listen to Daniel Dines, who's the UiPath CIO, his vision is to have a UiPath robot for every single person that can actually take away those tedious and mundane tasks. So this one is an interesting one because every month we need to go through and we need to download our LinkedIn invoices and we need to add these to an expense claim process. This is actually one of the personal ones that I created. And although this wasn't hard for me to do on a monthly basis, it was just time consuming and it just created many tedious clicks for me to do on a monthly basis. I needed to remember to do this at a certain time of the month. And then I needed to go through, get this invoice and add it into my expense claim. So what the solution was to actually bring together UiPath and K2. So what we did is we created a UiPath robot that logs into LinkedIn and downloads the latest invoice for me. UiPath then opens up Apps for Ops, which Apps for Ops is built on K2, and this is what we use for our expense claim system internally. It navigates the expense claim app, and it actually adds that LinkedIn invoice for me as an expense claim line item in one of my drafts. So again, not rocket science, but just saves me heaps of time and remembers to do it in the background for me. So let's look at this in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up UiPath Studio here, and I'm going to click Run, and this just allows me to show you the robot running. And the first thing that's actually going to happen is a browser is going to open and it's going to browse to LinkedIn and it's going to log in as my user. What you're seeing now is a UiPath robot acting independently. I'm not clicking the keyboard or doing anything. And the UiPath robot is going to go down now to my premium subscription, go to my purchase history. It's going to be intelligent enough to select the last invoice. It's going to click on that invoice. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to print that off and save it as a PDF for me. So in the background, it's going to go browse to an area that I've selected. I just save it onto my desktop. It downloads the invoice, and then it goes through and it actually logs out of LinkedIn. The next step, it logs into Apps for Ops for me. And again, this is all happening in the background. It identifies that I have an expense claim draft. It selects that expense claim draft. It goes through and it edits that expense claim draft. And then what it does is it goes through and creates me a new expense claim line item. It takes all the details that it's gathered from that invoice. It fills in the amounts, fills in some details around the description of the expense. It even selects a category for me, and it goes through and it actually uploads the attachment for me and saves that off as an expense claim draft. A really, really great scenario just to show things of how K2 and UiPath can start off by working together. So what that allowed me to do, it automates all the tedious and time-consuming work, which obviously saves me time. It allows people to focus on more creative, challenging problems, and it just works. It happens in the background. Although I ran that for you through UiPath Studio so you could actually see what was happening, generally that robot would just run in the background on a specific schedule once a month, and it would go through and actually add those details in for me, and it would send me a little email to say that that's all being done. I've created some video demos of all of the demos that I've showed you today, and I'll put these links in the slides for you. Emma will send around all of these slides for you afterwards with links to all the demos, so no need to copy or take that down. All right, so that's a great introduction to some of the things we can do, but let's take a look at a bit more of an interesting scenario. The next one is around master data management. So we had a customer that was spending a considerable amount of time emailing around spreadsheets to capture master data. So for those of you who aren't aware what master data is, generally this is pieces of information that go into a company's ERP system. This could be details on maybe parts or different products that people sell. But really what was happening is this company was actually mailing around spreadsheets to get these different new pieces of master data approved before they wanted to put them into their JD Edwards system. So eventually, going through lots of people's inboxes and mails, things getting lost, once it was eventually approved and assuming that it could be found, someone then had to manually go and capture that into JD Edwards, which is the ERP system. As you can imagine, this process was time consuming, it was very error prone, and there was little to no visibility on actually what was happening inside the organization, who had these documents, what they were doing with them, or when they may be approved. So the solution was actually to weave together a K2 and UiPath solution. The first part that we automated was we used K2 for the digital process automation piece. So what K2 did, it eliminated the spreadsheets and it digitized the whole master data process, including the approvals. And then from a UiPath perspective, what we did is once we had got approvals for that master data, we passed this off onto a UiPath robot that automatically then went and captured those details into the JD Edwards system. Now, I guess it should be pointed out, K2 has a piece of technology called Smart Objects where we could have written this directly into the JD Edwards system. But here, because it was some older technology, the APIs weren't available. So it was a perfect scenario to use UiPath to actually go through and use screen clicks to go and capture that data for us. Okay, so let's go have a look at what that process actually looks like. Again, I'm going to open up UiPath Studio here and I'm going to click on Run and I'm going to show you what happens. So the first part of this process is I actually created a UiPath robot to go through and actually log into the K2 workspace. And the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to capture me a new piece of master data that I need to send around for approvals. For those of you who may not be familiar with K2, this is a workspace. So this is an area where someone can go to get access to their processes. We're going to navigate to something called Play Company, which is just a fictitious company. And there you can see it clicks on a new item master. And now what the robot is going to do, it's going to go through and it's going to capture some details on this K2 smart form. Again, on the window on the right-hand side here, that's a K2 smart form. You'll see the yellow boxes indicate that that's actually the UiPath robot going through and actually selecting these different fields in the form and inputting some data for me. So again, it's just a nice example of how UiPath and K2 can speak to each other. So as we go through here, it will select different things from the drop-down list boxes. It will put some details in. And then what it's going to do down the bottom of the form, it's going to select which user we should send this task to for approval. And once we send that task for approval, what's going to happen is this is going to go through and kick off a K2 workflow process. It's going to send a user an email to let them know they have a task. They're going to go through then and click on that link in the task. They then are going to log into K2 and review all of the details that have actually been submitted. And then they get to make a decision to say either approve or decline. And in this case, the user is going to approve it. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that task off that human user's work list because they've completed everything that they may need to do on that now. Finally, the K2 process is actually going to send an email off to a specific mailbox, which is then going to go through and it's going to trigger us a UiPath process. So just to look at the UiPath process, we have a UiPath process now that is looking at a specific mailbox. And what it's going to do, it's going to pick up that a new email has actually come in there. It's going to pass some details on that mailbox and pick up the URL that's in that email. And then it's going to go through and it's going to start off this add item master process. And what this is going to do, it's actually going to go log in to a JD Edwards application. It's going to log into K2 at the same time, take all the details from the K2 form and actually copy that into the JD Edwards system. So let's have a look. So here you can see at the bottom, it says the robot's saying that I've found a new email that matches my criteria. And the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to pick up all of those details that have been approved using the K2 workflow. So here you'll see the view is an RPA view for the robot. It goes really quickly, but it scrapes all the data off there. And now what it's going to do is it's logging into the JD Edwards system. So it already has all the details. It's going to click now the new item master. And what it's going to do, it's going to capture these details into JD Edwards. So again, it's picked up the details from the K2 smart form that's been approved by the humans, and it's going through now and it's capturing this with exact details into JD Edwards very quickly, very fast, without the need for any human to get involved. And we know that this is all going to be 100% accurate as the details were approved by the human. So it'll go through and it'll just process the rest of these for us. And once done, it's going to go off and it's going to say save. And as soon as the robot's finished doing that, it's actually going to log out. And the final part is it's going to say that it's waiting for a new piece of information or a new email to come into the inbox. So there's a bit more of a complex scenario around using K2 and UiPath together. I guess the outcomes in this scenario was that K2 allowed the customer to cut costs, save time, it increased visibility, and it gave them better master data management. And then from a UiPath perspective, it automated the very repetitive and mundane tasks of actually capturing that approved data into JD Edwards, which again reduced any human error, boosted accuracy, and made sure that it was right every single time. Once again, I've included the link there for a nice end-to-end demo for you, should you want to go look at that again following the webinar. All right, moving on to the third and final example that we're going to show you today, and probably the most complex one. This is another very common one, and this is using K2 and UiPath for invoice processing. So really the problem with this one was there was a company spending a considerable amount of time processing supplier invoices. What was happening is these invoices were being emailed into a central email inbox. And what someone needed to do, they needed to go through each one of these emails, open them up, review the invoice that was attached to the email. They needed to categorize that invoice. And then what they needed to do is they needed to extract the payment details, which included things like the invoice amount and whether that might be BPay details or bank account details, where the invoice needed to be paid. What happened then is then a human again logged into internet banking and then actually made the payment for that specific invoice. So really an interesting and quite a human intensive process. But what we actually did in this scenario is we brought together the worlds of RPA, AI or artificial intelligence, and digital process automation to offer a full lifecycle business automation. So in this scenario, what we did is we used the UiPath robot to monitor the mailbox. Once a new invoice came into that mailbox, this triggered off or started the UiPath robot. And the UiPath robot opened up that invoice. It did some OCR or optical character recognition on the invoice. It categorized it and it extracted all the necessary details. Now, the necessary details was the invoice amount, what the bank account details were, and any other details that were around that invoice. And then what we did is we actually, depending on how accurate that artificial intelligence felt that invoice extraction was, it did one of two things. So if it was very confident, meaning that it feels like it got all of that extraction 100% correct, the UiPath robot then automatically logged into internet banking and processed the payments. So in that path of the process, there was actually no need for any humans to be involved in that process, and it freed up that team's time to do a lot more valuable things on a day-to-day basis. But if it wasn't so confident that the extraction was very accurate, or perhaps there was some missing data in that scenario, what we did is we actually brought a human into the loop and we pushed the task off via K2 to a human. And what that human could do is they could open up this task. On the left-hand side, they'd be able to see the initial invoice that had actually been submitted. They'd be able to see any of the extracted details on the right-hand side. They'd be able to update any of those details or fill any details that may not have been complete. And then what they did is they actually submitted off that invoice. What then happened is K2 passed that back to the UiPath robot, and the UiPath robot then automatically went in and logged into internet banking and processed the payment. So a really, really nice scenario showing these two technologies coming together. All right, so let's look at what this looks like in action. Firstly, here is UiPath Studio, and this is the first part of the process. So this is just showing where the UiPath robot is waiting for a new email to come into the email inbox. Once it comes into the inbox, what we do is we use some OCR capabilities. In this case, we use Microsoft OCR. UiPath has the ability to use things like Abby, Infusoft, Google OCR, or even there's some read PDF capabilities. But in our case, we use the Microsoft OCR capabilities. And then what happened was we went through and we extracted all of those details, and we actually opened up a K2 smart form and pushed all of those details into the K2 smart form that could then go off and call the UiPath robot or get a human involved should they need to be. What this looks like is, here's an example of the email. For those of you who may use Zero, this is a zero invoice or a zero invoice email. So once this email comes into this inbox, what's going to happen is this is going to start off a UiPath process. So let's go through and actually look what happens when UiPath kicks off. So UiPath has figured out that there's a new email that's come in. It's already extracted that URL and it's actually gone and opened up this invoice for me. You can see on the bottom right-hand side, it's going through and it's clicking Save As. And what it's going to do, it's going to save this invoice into a location on my desktop. The next thing that's going to do, it's going to go through and it's going to OCR. Unfortunately, I can't really show you the robot doing that. But what the OCR did there in the bottom right is it realized that it had some incomplete details. So what it's going through and doing is it's going in and it's logging into K2. That's a K2 smart form. And the UiPath robot is capturing the details that it did manage to extract onto the K2 smart form. Okay, so you can see here, it's got some of the details. It didn't pick up the biller code. It didn't pick up an amount. And what it's actually going to do, it's even going to attach that invoice as an attachment because we're going to want to assign a task to someone to go through and review this. Okay, so let's look at the next part. Now that that process is actually kicked off, here's the K2 workflow process. And what you'll see there is it's going to go through and it's going to assign a task to a user to go through and then review this invoice. So if we look at what happens here, this user, Steve, who got assigned the task, has got that task on their task list. You'll notice on the left-hand side here, we've actually brought up that invoice for the user. And on the right-hand side, you can see all of the details that the UiPath robot managed to extract. One of the things it didn't manage to get was the account name. So we're going to go through and we're going to look at the invoice on the left and we're going to capture that. We're going to validate all the other details, including the BSP number and the account number. On the left-hand side, you can do a number of different things. So because it's a PDF viewer window, we can obviously zoom in and zoom out and check all the details. For the reference number, maybe what we want to do, there was an I and a 1 that maybe got a bit confused there. And maybe what we even want to do inside here is we wanted to include the invoice number. So we'll go through first, we'll just add the amounts in there, and then we'll go back in here and we'll zoom in, check that that's all good. So it looks like it's 234, and we'll go up a little bit higher and we'll go get some of the details on the invoice number. So there you can see the invoice number is ORC1039. And we'll copy that and we might put that into the reference number. So we'll tweak around the reference number and we'll add those details. I think what we need to do is add it at the end, just so we have the reference in the correct format, and we'll add that. And once we're all done and we made sure that the details are all correct, we'll actually say that that's marked as categorized. All right, so what that's done now is now that that invoice has been categorized correctly, here is something called UiPath Orchestrator that I'm not going to have too much time to cover today, but K2 has gone off and it's dropped those approved details now onto a UiPath Orchestrator queue. And what this is going to do is once something gets dropped onto this queue, this is going to trigger a UiPath robot to automatically go and log into internet banking and make the payment for that invoice. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So once it's dropped onto the queue, we'll go through here and here's the UiPath robot going in. This is a Play online banking company where it's logging in with some details and a secure code. It's clicking on a specific account. It's going through and saying, I'd like to pay something. And it's using now all of those approved details that we have and adding that into a transaction via internet banking. And once it's done, it's going to click Pay Now, and we can see that that payment has now been made. And the next thing that's going to happen is that UiPath queue or Orchestrator queue is going to wait for the next thing to get dropped off on it, and then go through and process the rest of the transactions. So that's a really, really nice way to be able to see how by using K2 and UiPath, we can offer full lifecycle business automation. In this scenario, we use some artificial intelligence, and that was specifically around some of the computer vision pieces on how we actually OCR that invoice, which allowed us to pick up details on that invoice much more accurately. And then what happened was the end-to-end process was actually fully automated, and we only needed to involve humans when needed. Obviously, as you can imagine, from the very labor-intensive, mundane processes that this company was originally doing, this allowed them to gain significant cost, time, and resource savings using a combination of K2 and UiPath. All right, once again, I've included the link to the demo on the bottom there, and you can go back and watch that demo should you wish to. So just a quick summary of things we showed you today. So we took you through 3 examples of how you can use K2 and UiPath together to give you full lifecycle business automation. I know there was many people signed up on the webinar who may not have known about K2 and have been using UiPath. So if you'd like to find out a bit more about K2, you can always drop Andrew an email on andrewb@k2.com. Following the webinar, we'll send around an email with a link to all of the resources, and there'll also be a nice schedule a call button in there. That schedule a call will just allow you to ask Andrew any questions should you have any. And also K2 offers something really great called Play with K2, where you can get on and you can experience and touch the software yourself in a wide range of different scenarios. So you can chat to Andrew about that. If you are, however, interested in getting started with UiPath, please feel free to drop me an email on sean@rapidMATION.com. Very similarly, in the email, you'll have a link to schedule a call, and I'm happy to answer any questions or look at any scenarios that you may have. And also what we've done is, because this is a nice K2 UiPath scenario, should you have K2 and you haven't started exploring UiPath just as of yet, or robotic process automation, we actually have a starter pack that we call Getting Started with RPA. And what we do, it's a 10-day starter pack where we will actually come in and we'll help you select any processes or help you go through a number of processes to see which may be good fits for RPA. And what we'll do is actually work with you in the 10 days to get a fully functioning POC up and running in your environment. There's some nice reports that finish that off, and that gives you your first entry point into the RPA world to see if it's something that you would like to carry on with. If that is something of interest, again, when the email comes around, schedule a call or drop me an email on sean@rapidmation.com. All right, so that's all we had to show you today. We wanted to keep it nice, short and sharp, but I hope you found value in that and you've been educated a bit around DPA and RPA, what the differences are and how they can play really nicely together. Just to summarize again there, if you need any more details, please drop us an email on either andrewb@k2.com or sean@rapidmation.com. All right, and I'll just open it up to any questions. If there are any questions, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A manager, and Andrew and I will go through those and we'll pick some out. Andrew, why don't I hand back to you? I'm not sure if there's any K2 questions in there as of yet.
Thank you, Sean. Just one question at the moment around how does K2 integrate with UiPath? So UiPath have a REST service that K2 has got the ability to integrate with. So essentially it's setting up a Swagger file. If you search in the K2 help site, help.k2.com for UiPath, there's a whole KB article about how to set that up. But essentially you can download a Swagger file from that help that KB and follow the instructions. There's a little bit of work there around setting up the authentication, but it's all documented for you in steps on that site.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll take a few now. Thanks. There's lots of great questions in here. First one from Trust. Thanks for a great presentation. Thanks, Trust. There's another one from Bijo saying, is it possible to invoke a K2 workflow from Orchestrator on a timely basis? And can we get the UiPath K2 sample projects using the connector? So, Andrew, let me take that one because I think I know. So I know on the K2 help website, there is a full KB article on setting up the REST-based service. So you can definitely look at that. And then from the UiPath side, when you want to kick off a K2 process, it's actually really simple. It's an activity inside UiPath. It's a K2 one. You go through, you select, you connect up to your K2 instance, and then you select your workflow, and you can pass in a number of parameters in there. So Bijo, you can take a look at that. If you need more help, drop Andrew or I a note, and we can take things from there. Another one from Rachi. Great presentation. Thank you very much. Trust, another one from you. What are the license costs for UiPath? So Trust, just drop me an email. I'll send you some details on the licensing. I guess the good news is there's UiPath Community, which is similar to Visual Studio Community, which you can have a play from that perspective. And then it really depends on how many robots you want running. If you want to set up UiPath Orchestrator, which is UiPath Orchestrator is the one that can obviously schedule processes and that type of thing. Okay, is developer license available for UiPath? Yes, Srinivas, there is UiPath Community. Again, if you want to drop me an email, I can point you in the right direction for that. Some other great questions here. Okay, so the question really is around attended and unattended robots, right, from a UiPath perspective. So an attended robot, for example, could be if I'm in a call center and I'm chatting to a customer on the phone and I may need to go and update 5 backend systems with the customer details. One of the scenarios that I can line up with UiPath is I can go through and kick off one of these robots to go through and log into each of those systems and update those systems for me. That's more an attended robot where I, as a human, am saying, okay, I know I need to update these systems, go and do it for me. An unattended robot is something that happens in the background. So perhaps if I relate it back to the last example where I show you when we wanted to push that off to internet banking, that's an unattended robot. I push that onto a UiPath orchestrator queue, and that's happening for me in the background, which is really good. Okay, some more questions. Brilliant presentation. Thank you. Like UiPath, do we have another RPA tools to integrate with K2? Yeah, I'll take that one, Andrew, as well, because I know that K2 very recently announced a global partnership with Blue Prism. As far as I'm aware, on help.k2.com, there are some details on how you can set up K2 and Blue Prism scenarios. So Richie, definitely go check out that as well. Hopefully that's helpful. Andrew, there's quite a lot in here. I don't know if you've got any other questions that you want to pick up. Maybe we take another one or two and then we can get back to other people.
Let me just have a look, Sean. So we've got a question here around using it for testing. So theoretically, yes, you could use UiPath to test your K2 smart forms. Of course, you can use the UiPath capabilities to open up a K2 smart form and to populate data onto a form. So you could certainly do something like, do a config spreadsheet with a whole bunch of values and have your UiPath robot test the form. So that's a possibility as well.
Yeah, that reminds me of a scenario a customer gave me the other day. Is they were looking to use a UiPath robot to do K2 deployments in a production environment. So that was a really interesting one. That's another one we might look at very soon. So that kind of ties into that. Andrew, sorry, I've got another one here. So how can we identify which use case for UiPath and K2? Is there any definite parameters on which we can decide? So Richie, we actually, on the rapidMATION website, maybe drop me an email. On the rapidMATION blog, we very recently did a series on great processes that are implemented in K2 using digital process automation and great processes that are implemented using robotic process automation. And then some ideas on which are best to choose and when to use which tool. Drop me a note and I will send you the links to that. Should you want to jump on now, just go to rapidmation.com/blog, and we created a whole series around that stuff. Okay, I see there's a good few more questions here. Maybe I'll take 2 more. Andrew, is there any more that you want to cover off?
No, that's okay. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, so I'll take the last one here. Question from Jovius regarding the K2 and Blue Prism partnership. Is this global or geographic? I believe it's global. So I know there's some details on help.k2.com. And finally, Manjusha, this will be the last question. Can K2 workflow trigger a process in Orchestrator? Manjusha, yes, it definitely can. And that was in my scenario, right? So when that invoice came through and the human got involved by K2 to put all the details into the smart form, make sure the amounts and everything was correct, what we did is we dropped that off onto a UiPath orchestrator queue, and then the UiPath robot picked it up from that queue and then processed the payment through internet banking. Okay.
I believe also, Sean, you can start a job from the UI orchestrator, and K2 should be able to integrate and start jobs.
Brilliant. Okay, good. Well, I know, I think we're out of time for today. There is a whole load more questions, really, really good questions. We just picked up a few from the Q&A manager. For those of you who we didn't get to today, apologies for that, but we will drop you personal notes between Andrew and I just to answer your questions. And again, in summary, if you have any further questions or you'd like to play with K2, drop Andrew a note. Alternatively, for those of you who may be curious about getting started with RPA and specifically UiPath, if you'd like some more details on that 10-day starter pack, we'd love to have a chat and see how we can help you choose a process and then actually get that running using UiPath, and that may or may not integrate into K2. But I think that's it for today. So thank you very much for taking the time out to join us. We will send around an email with all of the resources so you have those, and please let us know if we can answer any more questions. Thanks again.